You're listening to the Paul Higgins podcast for SaaS consulting partners ready to scale beyond six figures without more work or a bigger team. Let's dive in. If you're a SaaS consulting partner wondering, should I double down on my current platform or start building AI agents instead, this episode is your roadmap. Ken Gavranovic has been doing this AI thing since it was cool, or since before it was cool anyway. He's helped Fortune 500s navigate disruption, raised 400 million for no-code pioneers, and he's building digital employees that are transforming how businesses scale fast. You'll hear exactly how AI agents, no-code platforms, and customer intelligence are reshaping the SaaS landscape and what it means, especially for your business. Hello, I'm Paul, and welcome to the Paul Higgins Show, episode 612. And in this episode, I talked to Ken from productgenius.guru. Ken is a seasoned technology executive, a global keynote speaker, and member of Thinkers 50 and Forbes Council. He's worked with iconic brands like Disney World, 7-Eleven, helping them to turn tech into tangible results. Want to see Ken in action? Head over to the Paul Higgins Mentoring YouTube channel. And what I'll do now is hand you over to Ken from productgenius.guru. Great to have you on, Ken.
Paul, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, what a time we live in. I just can't believe that I've seen lots of, I've certainly seen lots of innovation, but I don't think I've ever seen anything that's directly impacted my role as much as AI. And for you, who's been in it, like you said, for a long time, it hasn't, like most of us have been in it for 2 years, you've been in it for 7+. It's an amazing time. And for you, just quickly, how did you fall into the AI space? When did it first cross your door?
Yeah, so I'll say two things. Is one, just my opinion on AI, and I've been blessed to be in a lot of major transformations for people in business. So, when I was in my 20s, I started a hosting company that we did an IPO, took it from zero to a couple hundred million. That was in the middle of the internet. And there was a time where people thought, like, is this internet thing going to be real? I remember like sitting with VCs, and one time I did a pitch, and there's like $10 million pictures. I remember the VC looked at me and goes, "Kid, do you believe your bullshit?" Because I said every business is going to run their business on the internet. So I think that you had the internet, you think about like digital transformation, and then we've got this thing called AI. And I believe that AI is going to be the most transformative thing, probably in good ways and bad, to business and humans than anything that's ever been created since man existed. That's how big I believe it is. And
Yeah.
so I just want to share that from a philosophy. I don't know if you feel the same.
Exactly. And I think it's like anything that humans invent, it's got pluses and minuses.
Correct.
I sort of sit on the fence that it's going to be more plus than minus. I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's ultimately gonna be plus because I just believe in mankind. And so far we figured out every single innovation through transformation. I mean, there's a reason why our species is where it is it figure things out and it's constantly growing. And so I think this is going to be a step, but it's going to be a powerful step because currently at least AI can't do original thought. It's just not capable. But it can take all of the original thoughts that we've ever had as humans, and it has it in its mind, and it processes very much like a human. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'll dig in more. But let me answer your question. You said, AI, how did I get into it? It actually is probably more like 9 years ago. The first time I got into AI, I was at a company called Cox. And so maybe you've heard of Kelly Blue Book, Auto Trader. It's massive, like $100 billion a year. And
Yes.
I started this really small business unit. When you and I go buy a car and we trade it in, a dealer behind the scenes then takes it and then they send it to Manheim and then they do a wholesale price and they trade it. So, they give us, let's call it 10,000. They know that they can go get 13,000 because they know what the wholesale market is, and that's the way it works. And so I wasn't familiar with it. When I got into the way it is done historically is literally these massive, massive lots where tens of thousands of cars go in and they're literally auctioned off in real time. It's an amazing thing to see like 50,000, 100,000 just going. One of the things Cox does a really good job is it tries to out innovate itself. So if you think about Auto Trader, Cox, a different division, used to own tons of newspapers, and they realized that the classifieds were going to be disrupted. And so we can either get disrupted by somebody else or we can disrupt ourselves. And so they funded internally a company called Auto Trader to disrupt themselves so that they kept the revenue where it was going. So
Smart.
I got involved in a different business, which is called Dealer Match. And this was the idea is that if car dealers are going to trade with each other, let's just do it electronically. Now, this is going to shock you because we know, car dealers, they're the most trustworthy people you can ever run into, but car dealers didn't trust dealing with car dealers.
Yeah,
And so
surprise,
we had built this
surprise.
platform that allowed people to electronically transfer and trade, but there was no trust. And so one of the things we did is we used AI to start analyzing who they had traded with in the past because they're more likely to trust people that they've traded and start presenting and kind of connecting them based upon their historical connections, which then increased that dramatically. So that was kind of my first touch with AI. Fast forward a little bit, a company called New Relic. So again, if you think about, let's call it 8 years ago, we might go to Disneyland and our Disneyland app might crash, right? Or you would see a lot more crashes in our mobile apps and our websites. And that was before there was something called application performance monitoring. So I used to work for a guy, CEO, a guy named Lucerne, amazing guy. But he had this idea if I can put metrics inside code, then we can monitor the quality of the code. And if I can monitor the quality of the code, then I can alert. And so I know instantly when something breaks. So what that built is a company called New Relic, and we would ingest billions of metrics from all these different customers and Disney and all these different companies. And so if you think about all this data, and we were alerting them when something broke. But what was the next step? What if we could alert them before it breaks? And so what we started using is AI. We created a product called New Relic AI to look through those anomalies of what's going in all these billions of events to say, hey, it looks like this thing's about to fail. So those were I'll call the too early. And then of course I've done other things with it with AI. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. And is a lot of that functionality the same, but the cost has come down, or is it a lot more functionality than what you were back in 8 years ago? Is
Well, I
the
say from the AI perspective, as the beginning, you were kind of building this yourself. With the large language models that have been created, a lot of this is just so much easier. So when I first, those two examples I gave you, you've got your own, PhD scientists I had working for me in Israel, and you're really getting them to figure out and kind of build your own proprietary models. Whereas now, in many cases, you can grab one of these public models and then do additional training for what's relative to your business and pump data. So what I would say is definitely prices are coming down and the innovation points and where you have to innovate in the technical stack, don't want to get too technical, is coming down. So it means more value and easier to unlock value, which I think, we talked about the last 3 years. That's why you see there's been that flip already of adoption in AI. And statistically, AI adoption in your life, in my life, in company's life, this is the fastest technology transformation adoption statistically than anything that's ever happened in the history of technology.
Yeah, it's incredible. And sort of on that theme, I know that there's a lot of talk where the large incumbents, the large SaaS incumbents like Salesforce, NetSuite, etc., the infrastructure, they're like the Titanic, right? They've got hundreds of thousands of employees and it's very hard to maneuver. Whereas now, if you start from scratch and no code or low code option, you can create something that is fit for purpose, product market fit, as they say, a lot quicker with a lot less people. So you can be a lot more nimble, which people are saying that that's going to eat away at the profitability of the large incumbents, right? They just can't move as quick to do that. What's your thoughts on
Sure.
that?
We are opening up on a really important part. So let me hit that from a couple of different perspectives. So one, if you think about, no code's also been around for 15 years,
Yes.
right? So, and I was involved with the Google funded, raised $400 million pandemic. So I'm very familiar with no code solutions and what that's doing. So what that really is as a business, I've got this thing, I've got this problem I want to solve. Developers historically expensive, hard to retain. If I can make it so that someone that understands problem solving but's not a hardcore developer can build it faster, it's going to be great. Downsides often to no code is sometimes maintainability because you can get, if you're trying to do pretty complex things, it could kind of, you're doing a lot of things in no code to do those things. So it could get pretty complex from a maintainability. Sometimes performance characteristics aren't great, especially if there's a lot of processing. What I'm seeing is in many cases, some of the no code solutions out there are actually seeing flat to declining sales without naming anybody in particular. I do a lot of work with PE and VC companies, and I've gotten calls recently like, "Hey, we've got the $60 million no code company that," and I said, "Well, what's the flat line? What's the churn?" And it's like, "Oh, churn's up, revenues like." So I think, and the reason is the other part of that is your ability, the hard parts of coding, like you've got an okay developer, if they know how to ask the right questions with the development tools, they can rapidly build code. And if you think about like Microsoft just announced that 30% of their code's AI driven. Again, I do a lot of work with private equity companies. When we fully implement AI, for every 3 developers, you get another developer free in productivity. What that's doing, and then I want to get back to your SaaS question, is like private equity owned SaaS companies that provide services. Used to be like, hey, we've got it to a point, we've got it, it's good, we can do minimal R&D investments, kind of like let's make some profit off this business. But what they're seeing is now an upstart can see kind of their core value.
Yes.
And what used to be one of the obstacles is we had, 500,000 lines of code and, $50 million in R&D expense. Well, now you might have 6 people with AI, they can build that exact thing. The go-to-market part's still hard, right?
Yes.
But the technology piece, they might be able to build that half the time for 20% of the budget. So you're seeing private equity really forcing all their companies to embrace AI because the innovation cycle's going way, way up. And so going back to SaaS companies, I think like the Salesforce and those guys, they've got so much entrenched value. So like that one's so massive. I think it's gonna be a while before they get really disrupted, as long as they can. And I think they're like Salesforce would be a good example. I think they do a pretty good job constantly innovating in the way they've built their sandboxes. But I think for mid-tier SaaS companies that provide those things, those are the ones that have to be very, very careful. And if they're not innovating and really paying attention what their customers want, could be in real trouble.
The discussions I'm having with some of my partners, and it may be, you listening, and just reminder, this is Gavranovic, if have I got that right,
Gavranovic, but
Ken?
it's one of those names I always just say Ken's good enough.
This is episode 612. They talk about, do I split my effort, right? Like, do I rely on, and let's just use Salesforce as an example, it's the easy one. Do I rely on being just a Salesforce partner and that they're going to either acquire or develop enough AI into their product that that's all I've got to do? Or do I need to go out and actually have an AI arm myself and move more towards AI and more agents, and then sort of balance my bets against the incumbent? So there's some of the conversations we're having at the moment. I'd love to get your insights into that.
Well, that's a great question. What I would say, first of all, I always tell companies like when they're doing AI, people think it's a technology thing. It's a people, process, and technology. So I think when you're selling a customer, or customers embracing AI, let's just take that framework for just a quick moment,
Yeah.
is it really is rethinking every single part of the process, the way you do business. So if that is the case, then maybe you have Salesforce to do those functions. There may be parts where an AI agent or some of this new technology really is a much more efficient way than you've done it because maybe you built some crazy workflows in Salesforce or something else that you can really make much, much faster. So I do think you're going to see where there's certain areas where you're going to rethink the way you're processing parts of your business and embracing AI agents and AI workflows. And in many cases, if it's a much bigger company, you might take an existing LLM model and custom train it on yourself. That'd be like an advanced use cases. But in the vast majority of the cases, you can just use the AI, whether it be from Anthropic or, Ada, they all have it now.
Yes.
Pick the model. And I think that there's going to be parts, if you kind of holistically rethink how we do everything, you're going to see where, wow, that's where we're having a human interact with Salesforce. We could take that whole human Salesforce interaction and automate the entire process and just have the output maybe go into a Salesforce workflow. So
I,
I would suggest your partners would definitely invest and be knowledgeable because I think their customers are going to be looking for it.
I think that's a brilliant reframe. I constantly tell my clients, you're not a Salesforce partner, right? You're someone that solves a critical pain point for someone and gets them a result, right? That's what you do, which
Yep.
covers all of those areas. Because, like you said, we've always talked about technology adoption, and it's more than just the technology. It's about those other two P's that you mentioned. So I think that's really smart, and I think that's where you need to broaden your service because, like you mentioned before, if you don't do it, someone else will. right? So someone else is going to take that from you. And, agents is something that is sort of like the next wave. If you think about, we've all done the more of the basic LLMs, and we've sort of, used all, the ChatGPTs, the Anthropics,
Mhm.
etc., right? We've all done that. And then some of us have created our own, a few of us, and now it's all about agents. That seems to be the next, for 2025, agents is the buzz. So first, what is the difference between an agent and an LLM? And then we can go into more use cases of how you could potentially use agents.
Well, there's more sophisticated ways of doing it. I'll just tell you how I think about it simply. Is you think
Yep.
about LMM, that's we'll call it the core knowledge base that it's going to do. And then the agent piece is really effectively, on almost cases, either the prompt or code that you're putting in front of that to solve a purpose, if that
Yep.
makes sense. So you think about, you've got a customer service situation, right? So you've probably got rules, you've got procedures, you've got things. So you've probably got a core LLM, and then either you can train that LLM, or you can, I don't know if, and again, we get too technical for the teams, but you might have documents. You can do what's called vector mapping, where you basically take your documents and it turns it into a way which then you can, when someone, processes whatever that input is, you could basically say, okay, process it through that vector map. And what it will know is to take your key documents and ship those along with the question to Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever. And what you can do then is make it very, very knowledgeable about your business. I'll give you an example. So I'm involved in a startup called Product Genius, and one of the customers does medical for credit hours events. So they people, doctors and other people go to these events. So there's always questions like, well, how do I get certified? Where do I need to go? What's going to go on the events and this and that? And they would have people scattered on the floor and stuff like that. They use Product Genius, put up a QR code, put in all of the data, all of those documents.
Yes.
And now a customer can go in and just in English say like, "Hey, I'm trying to get my 3 credit points for this. Can you tell me which programs are currently open?" That da 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 da, and it can answer it explicitly. And so that's where I think going back to the agent is you can kind of take that core knowledge plus your proprietary knowledge within that framework and then have it deliver value ultimately to your customers or analysis or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and it's like another easy way of explaining it. It's like the digital employee. You got a physical employee, and then you got a digital employee, and that digital employee is normally the agent that is working between those LLMs. Is that another way
Yeah, I
of?
think that's a great way. And that's depending on the audience that I'm talking to. Some people like they understand agent, some people like, oh, digital employee. But really, if you think about what it is, like I'll just go back to Product Genius for a second, is like the way we've set up is you can literally say, here's your personality,
Yes.
here's your name, here's the documents that you know about. Scan my website, know everything in there, and then embed it in a QR code on your website, in a mobile app, whatever you want. And it just does that. It speaks in that tone and personality, answers to that name. And so it really is, I think when people really think about the capabilities, that's going back to process. You got to think about, what if I can hire a digital employee that, as long as there's not original thinking, and when I say original thinking, where it's this idea never existed before, if it's derivative thinking, it's a fantastic way to really drive efficiency. And ultimately, I think going back to like, oh, is this going to replace jobs or what does this mean? I look at it as, if your job is simply repeat step one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, that's not a great investment of the amazing thing that humans are. Like, we are so much more than that. So I look at it as AI is going to take away the things that as humans we probably shouldn't have been doing anyways. And that's going to change our jobs, but it's ultimately going to hopefully lead to a lot more satisfaction so that humans are doing high value work versus low value repetitive work.
This is a novice question, so forgive me for this. But if I look at, say, N8N, or some of the platforms that you can build your own agents upon, is Product Genius, does that sit above that? So is that sort of like doing that hard work for you? So instead of you going and trying to work out how to create your own agents, it's effectively creating the agents for you. It's like what, in some respects, what a Salesforce partner does over the top of Salesforce.
Yeah, I think exactly like that. It's a wrapper. So whether you do Product Genius or you could build it, it's a wrapper around the core LMM. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, great. And like, just a quick example, you talked before about some examples. Like, here in Australia, we have this crazy thing where they set a band for what a house will sell for. So does the US do a similar thing? No, I
When
think
we have pricing of what historicals are, what the market is, but like I don't like literally it's like, hey, if I want to sell my house, I say I'm willing to take this to this. No,
yeah.
what we
So
do is we do an
so here we're
asking
all
price and then
auctions.
we
Like
negotiate.
predominantly the
Okay.
market's an auction, right? So they give a range, you'll go there and you bid for it. Someone went to buy a house on the weekend, a friend of mine, and it was like $300,000 over the top of the range. Now, like I'm thinking, surely AI can just, take away all of the dodgy sales techniques. Like you talked about car salesmen, real estate agents, I suppose, go in a similar bucket. Let's just take all that away and then just let, it's got all, you got all the data, you got all the data of previous sales, you got all the data of, why is it up to some human to bluff the numbers? Anyway, that's
No, I think that's a good question because you could say like, there is probably a historical context, and the way they do it in the US is kind of you put a price that you hope for. And you might have a strategy where you put it low and hope a lot of people overbid for it if it's in high demand and create a bidding war. But I think in all these, like in housing, I think it's designed. Some things are designed to be inefficient. I actually believe insurance is designed to be inefficient. I think buying and selling houses is designed to be inefficient, because there's a lot more profit to not us.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great point, and just for everyone listening, if you're a regular, thanks. But I have got a thick Australian accent, so I apologise for that. But I live in Australia, but I work predominantly in North Americas. I'm still learning more and more, but I did spend 20 years with the Coca-Cola companies. I feel like I know enough to be dangerous at the moment. And anyway, we won't go down to current media. We'll leave that one
You've
off.
probably been in Atlanta many times, which is where I'm on the
Yeah,
north suburbs of it.
definitely sat at Woodruff's desk in Coca-Cola Atlanta a few times. The agents. What are some examples of how they're being used? I know you've got one called Sunny for Product Genius, but yeah, just give some examples of how they're being
Well,
used.
here's what I'd say. Like, let's just imagine all the places that they can be used in the future. So let's take SMB, and some of these are good or bad. So, for example, if you think about how good the audio agent is, where you can have a conversation, how many times have we gone to a restaurant and asked all kinds of questions where they weren't quite sure about this or that or the other part? That's a great. I'll just use that. Let's go into that example is because it does a couple things that I think also are interesting with AI. In a business, there's a lot of things that aren't recorded that are very valuable. And I think that's going to change. But like, let's just take that restaurant example. If you had an audio like where you could just talk to the AI because it could know the menu, it could know the history, it could know the specials. But if you had it going a lot, it also would know what people typically ask, what people typically like, what
Yes.
people order, what people don't like, the questions that they do have, the options that were wrong in delivery. So you think about we can capture a tremendous amount of data and then you could have people buzz people. Now, for me, I actually like talking to the waiter and waitress. So I don't know if I like something like that happen, but you think about we're capturing data that didn't exist, and that would give a tremendous amount of things. So I'll do go to Product Genius. Like we have that deployed in restaurants, and we can literally say, it looks like you have a staffing problem on Wednesdays from 3 to 4, because we're capturing the conversations in real time. And so it could say you just hired somebody great, you just hired somebody not great. It really gives you insight. So what I think you're going to see is companies really start to think about instrumenting all aspects of business and then how that's going to transform things. So I want to go back to your question in a second, but let's just think about the typical business that's selling things.
Yeah.
You've got the salespersons that's selling something. They're going to try to sell it. So
Yes.
first you have to find the customer, then they find the customer, then they sell it, and then they're successful or not successful. And if it's, let's say it's a technology company, you've got the product team that's trying to figure out what customers want. You've got customers giving feedback. You've got customer support. Well, in many companies, all of that data is not connected. And that's why you have sales fighting with product and stuff like that. So I think what you're going to see is companies say, wait, where are all of our touch points to our business? How can we start to instrument those? Because if we can instrument them, then we can pull the data in. And that's going to give us great insights because then our agents can be smarter. So you think about customer service, you think about sales, you think about even tools for the marketing team. If you knew all of the data of what are the key points that you clearly close deals on, then you can amplify that. So that's where I think you're going to see agents or the agent maybe even be an internal agent that just gather all that data and it's just a query agent for that. I'll give you an example. They had this law that they decided to change in the US called the Corporate Transparency Act. It's a standard in other countries, but in the US, you could go set up a company and not even really have any data about yourself. And so they put this law where everybody's going to have to capture it. And, one of the customers we had is we set up an AI agent because this law was very complicated
Yes.
and the rules are very complicated. And the AI agent to sit there and they literally had a 85% reduction in their customer support calls because now everybody can self-service and it was very accurate every single time.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And that's why, I'll sort of go back to what we talked about before, which is I think like if you look at Salesforce and Agentforce, it's great, but it's it's priced at the moment, let's say it's $2 per instance, and it's very much towards enterprise, right? Whereas, if you're dealing with SMBs, SMEs, it's really too expensive to do that. So you got to then look for other options. So I think if you are a Salesforce partner, NetSuite partner, and it's not in the core, I think you still got to look for other options. But I think also you should be the person that is always recommend, targeting a niche or a niche, right? So you're the specialist in that area and you're like a business consultant for them. I think you should be the person that's recommending what agents they should do. So you do all the research and you're providing them because the business owner's too busy to do that
They
themselves,
don't
right?
know.
So I think that's where this all comes into your world a lot more than what it's been. I think, you're ahead of where it is. So you're ahead of the pack, as the Canadians would say. And, you're sort of predicting where it should be, or you're in companies where it should be. But I think for us, this is a real wake up to say, hey, we've got to get in this space, right? We
Agreed.
can't just be core product anymore.
Right. And prior lives, I've worked with lots of integrators for Salesforce, ServiceNow, and so forth. And you think about, like you said, is you hire somebody that's not only an expert in Salesforce or ServiceNow or whatever it might be, but someone probably that knows my industry, right? That's typically what the service provider. And so when you think about it from my perspective, as you continue to be that partner to whether it be a small, medium, or even an enterprise customer, they're looking for you that advice. And if you can step outside of just the technology piece of the solution, but going back to the people process and say, hey, let's think about your business. You're in the automotive business, you're in the insurance business. Let's think about your inputs and your outputs. And we've already got flows of what we're doing with ServiceNow or Salesforce or whatever it is, but we have some expertise in AI agents and things like that. And let's just talk through, maybe we could do some pre-processing that eliminates some manual steps, even in how we're going to pull it in, and just, go in and rethink the way it is. And if you want to do, like, I'll call it like a bonus, again, I do like some advising and consulting with private equity companies. What they might consider if they really want to lean in with AI is go to the leadership team of that company, that customer that they're working with, and say, hey, listen, what we're seeing some of our other clients do when they think about AI is just think about it. Let's explain what it is, and maybe you could present, here's what AI and here how it can impact it, and then have the functional heads go off and look at parts of their business for patterns where it's repeatable parts or there's valuable data not being captured, and then bring that back to kind of like a cross-functional team, and then they could start taking action items. And I've seen that work very, very well.
Yeah, and just one more link back to your hometown, Atlanta. The Coca-Cola company, that's what they've done for over 100 years is just pattern match. It's like, okay, we've got all these customers. So this customer's doing this brilliant and we've tested it with this. Now, how do we then roll that out? So it's, it's a benchmarking exercise. And I think this is that, that format is the same here. You see someone that's, more innovative, more on the adoption curve, they do the agents and then you learn from that and then you go and apply it to someone that is doing it. So I think those fundamentals still exist, but it's now just in a different way, and it's around these AI agents. But look, we could go on for forever. Ken, I thoroughly enjoyed this, but what we're going to do is take a quick pause, thank our sponsors, and then we'll come back for the rapid fire. If you're relying on social media or AI to stay ahead in SaaS consulting, you're missing 90% of the conversation. AI doesn't have access to this information. No algorithm can replace real-world insights from top SaaS partners who've built multi-million-dollar consultancies. Every week, I send a short, high-impact newsletter straight into your inbox. No fluff, no AI-generated noise, just real strategies that work. You'll find exclusive interviews with top SaaS partners and industry experts, behind-the-scenes insights on what's actually working right now, and solo episodes and deep dives you won't find anywhere else on the planet. Recent topics include how top partners build seven-figure businesses without platform dependence, from Salesforce partner to integration powerhouse, and the 5 productivity shifts that doubled my output without adding more hours. This is the only place in the world where you'll get these insights. No recycled content, no AI summaries, just battle-tested strategies that help you land bigger deals and build a business that doesn't depend on you. Want it? Please subscribe now at paulhigginsmentoring.com/newsletter. That's paulhigginsmentoring.com/newsletter. Don't let AI or social media decide what you learn. Get the best SaaS consulting insights straight into your inbox. So, Ken, 4 questions, 4 rapid responses. So the first one is, what are some of the daily habits that you do to run your portfolio career?
Well, I always think it's like I always think about you want to make sure you're healthy too. So I have a big focus on health because then it kind of makes you do better in business. But
Yes.
I'm a big list. Like what I always start each day is even though I'm a technology guy, I'm an AI guy, I actually like a physical list. And there's a science behind that. When you make a list of the things you're going to accomplish this day and you check off things and don't, it reinforces the brain process, repeat steps. Because a lot of times if you don't do that, you kind of have a muddled day. So I'm a big start off the day. What am I going to accomplish? And really aspire to accomplish all of those things is kind of, I say, the top thing that I suggest.
Well, I know before we went live, we talked about all the books that you read, and you said you've read every book there in the shelf. But where else do you go to learn more about AI and what's happening in the future?
Well, of course, podcasts. I still like Harvard Business Review. I think they often have some really, good articles inside of that's one of my favorite places to go. And then the other part, if you haven't done it, if you think about it, everything's been scanned by these models.
Yes.
Go in if you're contemplating, if you're researching, it's amazing how you could just kind of have conversations with AI to drive in, have it share resources to make sure resources and where it's getting the data, make sure it's not hallucinating. You can get a tremendous amount of data specifically to the problems you're solving.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. If I could grant you one wish, what would that be?
Health for me and my fellow friends,
Yeah, brilliant.
family.
And the last one is, like you said, let's say 9 years. You've been in the AI game for 9 years. What do you know now that you wish you had known earlier?
It's a good question. I probably would say is how real is AGI or original thought from AI going to be? I think that's the big debate. Is it
Mm.
only going to be derivative or it's original thought? If it can truly start doing original thought, I don't even know where that goes.
Every night, YouTube, AI, and there's a lot of people predicting that's the next super intelligence is maybe only a couple of years away. So it'll be very interesting.
That's what some of the experts are saying, 3 to 5 years. And again,
Yeah.
it uses massive amounts of compute. What's funny is my kids are very conscious of nature and so forth. And so like they were telling me, Dad, do you say thank you to ChatGPT? And I'm like, well, no, I don't. I go, well, we read an article that just by people like saying thank you to ChatGPT burns so many trees, uses this many energy. And ChatGPT doesn't care if you say thank you or not.
Correct. It's just ones and zeros. I think that's it is the dichotomy that the more and more that we use compute, the more and more that we're putting carbon into the atmosphere. So it is it's an interesting one, and maybe the whole thing of mining Mars and
Put the
bringing it
dirty
back.
construction over there. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Maybe that's where the world heads. But like you said, humans will generally work it out, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. But look, it's been brilliant having you on the show today, and
Yeah, but
thanks for
Paul, can I just think one more thing, just if I
yeah,
could, just
go
for
for
your
it.
audience, is that one of the things I would just really, again, if I think it's a great sales opportunity, is how many times have we been in dashboard meetings where there's a bunch of data that's not actionable? And so I would again encourage when you start having these AI conversations, think about all of the data that you can capture because AI is really good at taking unactionable data and making it actionable. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in because I was thinking if I was an integrator, that's a good place to jump into.
Yeah, no, brilliant last point. Once again, thanks a lot, Ken.
Be well. Take care, Paul.
What a great interview with Ken, such a knowledgeable guy and perfect timing for what we need. And if you're still thinking about AI agents, should be cool, but how do I exactly use them with my clients? Re listen to Ken, and especially double down on what he said about digital employees, because I really do think that is the future. And Ken's insights were on the absolute bleeding edge. Reach out to Ken on LinkedIn. Thank him for being on the podcast, sharing all his knowledge, and also ask him questions. Start a conversation with him. As you can tell, he's such a knowledgeable guy, but also open and friendly guy. Share with your fellow SaaS consulting partners and peers. This is episode 612. And of course, go and watch Ken and I on the YouTube channel, Paul Higgins Mentoring. And that's it for today. But I'll see you next time on the Paul Higgins podcast. If you've got value today, hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and reach out. Let me know you've listened. I'd love to hear from you.